How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. I'm glad that you guys are honored that you guys even considered me to do this. So grateful to be here and having a good day so far for a Monday anyway.
All right. Well, that works. Well, Mondays are always a challenging, so it's always good when it's a good Monday. All right. So before we get started, just a couple of things to remind. If you have comments, make sure you post them in the chat, and we're going to open up for questions in a moment. Excuse me. So with that being said, let's just jump right into it. Caresse, tell us how you got started and what you do.
Yes, again, thank you so much. So, like Linda said, I work for Investigate TV. I do mainly consumer investigative reporting, and it can come in different forms. So I primarily do short form stories, which are like stories that last maybe about 1:30 to 2 minutes, and those are just about consumer awareness and protection. And I distribute those weekly to our great TV stations. And we have about 113 great TV stations across the country. It's about 36% of US households. And we also have a show or news magazine called Investigate TV. It's a 30-minute show, and it airs on great TV stations at different times during the weekend. So I do the short form stories, like I mentioned, that are like kind of consumer awareness, consumer education. They tell you about, hey, here's the latest scam, here's the latest fraud. And then I do the long major, what we call long form stories. And those can last 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes at a time. And those actually take me a little bit longer. So what we do with the short form stories, what we call Feed the Beast, we have those air weekly, daily on our great TV stations while I'm working on the bigger, hardier, meatier stories that air 2 or 3 months at a time. So that's a little bit about what I do now. Yeah, and just been in the business almost 15 years now. And it's been a journey. It's definitely been a journey. So.
That works. Well, so now before I go further, because I'm getting some messages that people can't see me, can you see me?
Oh, I can see you, but yeah.
Okay.
We can see you, Phillip. You look great.
All right, fantastic. I just wanted to make sure you could see me. So with all of your experience, how did you become a reporter doing what you did?
Yeah, so it was something I always wanted to do. I grew up in South DeKalb County, Georgia. I grew up in Metro Atlanta, and I remember my high school didn't really have like the daily morning report, but I knew journalism was what I wanted to do. So I kind of started in high school, like just writing little things about newsletters and stuff that we did in high school. That was my way of finding a way with little to get into the heart of reporting, and then. I knew that University of Georgia had a great journalism program, so I went to UGA, and I got into the broadcast news program. So I majored in broadcast news and international affairs. And then after I graduated, which is why I love this forum, I started off behind the scenes. I graduated 08, 09, and that was during the time of the recession. So it was so hard to get a job in news at that time. It was that was the period where news directors like, no phone calls, no emails, send us a DVD or a tape, and that's it. And you just have to hope and pray that you get in somewhere. So so I started off with that, and I started off as a producer. So I applied to at least 90 places, heard back from 5 and got 2 offers. That was about it. And so I got in Jackson, Mississippi. At WJTV, that's a CBS station in Jackson, Mississippi. They were looking for a producer. So started off behind the scenes as an associate producer, got bumped to a morning show producer, and I did that for about 3 years. But even when I was working behind the scenes, I knew in my heart I wanted to report. Reporting was my goal, my dream, my aim. And so I saw that there was an opening 2 hours north of Jackson, Mississippi, in Columbus, Mississippi. And so I left from behind the scenes, took a major pay cut, which I wasn't making a lot of money already. I was broke, but I took a major pay cut to report. And so I did the shooting, the writing, the editing in Columbus, Mississippi. It's what we call an MMJ, and multimedia journalist. So I was there for about 2.5 years, then went up to Flint, Michigan to become a general assignment reporter. And that's where I actually fell in love with investigative reporting, because when I was there was when the Flint water crisis happened. And it just taught me a lot about making sure that you're listening to the community, because for so long the people were saying that the water is not I'm itching, I'm scratching, I can't feel it. I'm breaking out into rashes. And the state and city would not listen to them. But we kept hearing this over and over and over again. And I said, okay, well, let's find a way to kind of build the facts. Let's keep a track record of what's happening. And that's when I kind of fell in love with the continuing coverage, investigative reporting, and what it means to actually listen to people and make sure that their voices are heard. So I was in Flint for about 2.5 years, almost 3 years. Left there, went to New Orleans, Louisiana, got a chance to do a little bit more investigative reporting, but I still didn't have that title. But I was doing it as well as general assignment reporting, which is the everyday turn. And then I went to Nashville, Tennessee for my first investigative reporting job officially. And I was there for about 3 years. And I just recently moved here to Washington, D.C. So I was with the same company. I was with Gray in Nashville, saw a promotion and took the chance, got it. And so that's what I'm doing here now. And so it's been a journey. And again, that's why I say you never know where life is going to take you. So those behind the scenes jobs, it just helped mold me as a person, as in my career, because I understood the importance of writing. And especially as a producer, you build your show from top to bottom. So you have to have this, like, you have to look at everything from a grand scheme of things. Whereas sometimes a reporter is just laser focused on your story, but as a producer, you're seeing it all. And I think that's helped me, guide me, even in investigative reporting today. So it's been a journey, a lot of states, but I'm really happy and grateful that I'm here now, doing the stories that mean so much to people, so that's what I do.
That works. And, I just had to, you said so many different things, but I just had to say, in 2008 and 2009, you were sending tapes and DVDs and CDs. Yes. You were still sending tapes and CDs
in
DVDs. 2008?
In 2008, 09, they would only require you, they said send a DVD, no phone calls, no emails, and that's how they did it. Not long after that, you started sending the YouTube links and stuff, and you could send your resume tape that way. But yeah, even then, I was sending out DVDs, and I remember just having a stack of manila envelopes, just sending it out to the post office every day. And it was just insane. I was spending a lot of money. It was a job looking for a job, I'll tell you that.
Yes. And I send out jobs, and I'm meeting with students and I'm meeting with graduates, and just as all of the career services directors do. And can you speak to the point of how important it is to be willing to move to get your foot into the industry?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, I was born, I'm the product of Caribbean parents, born in New York, raised in Atlanta. I was used to being in a multicultural, kind of city, big city. I'm a big city girl. And I remember when I told my relatives, look, there's a job in Jackson that I want to take. My mom was livid. She did not want me moving to a smaller city, a smaller town. And then the notion of Mississippi, right? Like that she was not happy with that at all. But I remember I was kind of crying in my room, and my dad was like, do you really want it? Do you want to take it? And God rest his soul, he was like, well, take it if that's what you want. And so moved so far away from home. I didn't know anybody in Mississippi, never been to Mississippi. But I'll tell you what I learned in Mississippi, those 5 years that I was there, helped just shape me into the person that I am. I still have good friends that are there. I still have connections that are there. I'm currently working on a major piece where I saw the story take place in Jackson, and I called up some of my friends. I said, hey, do you know about this? Can you help me get connections? Those connections matter even if you leave 10, 15 years down the road. So that just shaped me. And even leaving Mississippi and going to Flint, I mean, that just taught me so much. I mean, again, it made me figure out what my true passion is, which is investigations. And I still talk to so many people from Michigan to this day. It's like a second home to me. I was just telling Linda, in the Midwest, I've like, that's my second home now. And so it was just an eye opener. And everywhere I've moved, I've learned something. It's like a different chapter in my life. So, if you have to move somewhere, I always say, think outside the box. There may be a place that you never even thought you were going to be. But if it's for an opportunity that you want and your desire, I say go for it, because you just never know what you're going to learn from that situation. And that's honestly what I've learned just moving to all these places. I think I'm done moving now because I'm tired, but but all those places just taught me so much, and I just grew personally and professionally. And so I always say, take that shot, no matter if it's this place that you envision yourself living or not.
I agree. Congratulations on the move to DC.
Yes, thank you.
So let's ask this. How much time do you spend preparing the story?
Depends on the story. So if it's a short form story, like I just found a report about the crazy amount of airline complaints that we received in 2022. And a lot of it had to do with that meltdown that happened in December with Southwest. So that story is going to take me maybe a couple of days to do. You know, you see a file of complaints, look to see what's happening. They got it from the Department of Transportation. You know, you put those things together, get maybe a couple of passengers to talk to you. That doesn't take long. But for the long form stories, those could take months at a time. And it starts with just kind of gathering information. There's a story I'm working on right now about the preservation of Black cemeteries and how a lot of them are being erased because of development and because people are building over them. I got that from just a tip from somebody in Atlanta. So now it's like, okay, well, how do I make this relatable to people nationwide? What can I do to do that? Well, let's look for the data. Let's look for the information. If it does exist, how many other complaints are we hearing from across the country? So then I just start researching. And so now I found there's a complaint in Bethesda about this happening, a complaint in Mississippi, in Louisiana. So I'm just kind of connecting the dots. And that can take a couple of months. So right now we have a tentative schedule for that one to come out in August. And that's giving me the time to gather the information that I need to tell that story, to interview those people. So it's definitely not overnight if you're doing an investigative piece. It takes a lot of time, persistence, frustration, because you're just trying to connect the dots and put them together. So it could take a couple of months depending on what the story is and the magnitude of the story, really.
So for people who want to be on camera, because you start out as a producer and then you switch from being behind the camera to in front of the camera. For those people who want to be in front of the camera, what would you say are important pieces that they need to have in place to be successful?
One, be persistent, be bold, make sure that you're right. You're always working on your writing. The way I made the transition, I worked in the mornings, and on the weekends, I'd come in and work on my tape. And because you're not on air, you're thinking, how can I get that on-camera experience? What I did was I would take the raw video of a story that happened in the week, and I'd write it using the facts and everything, and just write it in my own way. And I had, thankfully, a mentor at my station that's like, you may want to write that script over. It's kind of long. You need to shorten it out. That's not the strongest piece of sound. Try to find something else. So I had someone to help guide me with that. And he was always, and I had some self-doubts myself. I was a producer. Everyone was telling me, stick to producing. You're good at producing. But in my heart, I knew I did not want to just stick to producing. And I had doubts. And my mentor would always be like, you got your tape ready yet? And I'm like, no, Ross, I don't have it yet. He's like, you got it? I'm like, no. I finally said, you know what? If this is what I want to do, I need to get on it. And so I would just put together my tape, keep working on stories, would try to do 2 or 3 stories a month, just on my own, and then go out and shoot stand-ups. And those, when you record your introduction or your stand-up within your story, and just keep working at it. And then I sent it out to so many places. Finally, this and it's so sad, he recently passed away, but I only heard back from one person that wanted to hire me as a reporter. And that's all sometimes you need. You need just that one shot. So that's what would be my advice. Like, if you find an opportunity where you are behind the scenes, it may take you working on your weekends, coming in and writing a story on your own, or shooting a stand-up on your own time. But if that's what you want to do, you make that commitment to it. And I think that's what really helped me get into the door, is that I knew I was doing my job. I didn't ignore the job that I was hired to do, but I knew that what I wanted to do was to be a reporter. And I did that on my own time.
So tell me now about what did you do as a producer? Because you have the beautiful benefit of being in front of the camera and behind the camera. So what did you do as a producer behind the camera?
Oh, a lot of stuff. So you do a lot of editing. Depending on where you start, if you start in a smaller city or some smaller market, sometimes you have to cut your own video. Really literally what we call stack the show. So from the minute the anchor says good morning to saying good night, have a good morning, enjoy your day, you put all that together. And so you stack the show from top to bottom with what's more important, what's in the middle, where does weather fit in, what comes after weather. Like you create a flow. It's like your vision, really. And so you have to know you have to organize really well. In terms of what starts, what finishes, what's in the middle, what ends. And you also have to have a knack for writing too, because as opposed to a reporter that's just doing one single story, you're sometimes writing all the other stories that you see within the show that you don't see a reporter in. That's the producer's job. And so you're doing all that work and you have to be quick with it. And I remember I had an anchor. She was a stickler for facts to the point where I got paranoid if I got it wrong. Now, she was kind of difficult to work with, but she taught me the importance of making sure that you have your facts right, making sure that you have it well written, because she would get on me. So that to me was important. So having strong writing skills, or at least just working hard to get those strong writing skills, is important. Making sure you're organized, and also just again being willing to edit things when necessary. Because there are some places where you may be the only producer on a show, and breaking news happens and you got to run and get something and get the feed and bring it down. So all those things are important. So you end up doing sometimes a lot of jobs in one setting, depending on the city and the resources within that news station.
So now we are in an age now, and I guess conspiracy theory has always been around. Conspiracy, ever since there was a fact, there was always an alternative fact to it. But now in this age, conspiracy theories tend to run parallel with facts. So the question that I have for you is, all of us are in the media industry. How, and I want to think about how I want to ask this question, but how important is it to do the research before the story breaks, as opposed to trying to break the story without all of the facts?
I'm a stickler for making sure you have your information first and foremost before you even break it. It's one thing to want to be first, but you've got to be right. And I think consumer news taught me that a lot, because especially in consumer investigations, you have a lot of people coming to you saying, oh, I have this complaint. It's like, so, okay, well, show me the evidence of your complaint. Where are your receipts? What information do I have to base this on? Where is your proof, right? And that's so important in investigative reporting, because if you don't have the proof or you don't have the facts, you don't have a story. You need to have that data and that information available to you at your disposal. And sometimes I have to turn people away. There's just a man that's like so adamant about me telling his story, but I'm like, sir, where are your receipts? Where are your emails that you had with this particular business that I can use? And he couldn't cough it up. And I had to tell him, I'm sorry, sir, if you don't have and that's why people always say, have your receipts ready. And so to me, you have to have all of that and have to have that foundation before you even tackle the story. Sometimes what I do, I also do background calls before I even interview somebody. So I'll have them, I'll say, hey, can we do a Zoom? That way I can kind of vet them to see if, okay, like, let me feel them out. Do they sound like they're being truthful? Are they not making any sense? Like that, you have to do those things. That's so important, and it is so vital, because like you said, misinformation, disinformation, all of that is out there. So as a reporter, as a journalist, you have to make sure you're doing all of the due diligence necessary. And again, that may mean you have to turn some people away from doing a story, but you'd rather turn them away and be right at the end of the day than have your credibility shot down, because that's the last thing you want. You work so hard to build credibility, and you don't want that to happen. So it's so important to me, because especially now as an investigator, you have to make sure that those things are in place before you even put it on air. And then you have to do that before, as an investigator, we have to have so many of our things look through. Attorneys have to look at our stuff too before we air it. So the attorneys are going to be asking me questions, and if there are holes, they'll call you out. So you got to make sure you have all that. People don't really understand the process behind the scenes and how much vetting goes into something, but there's a lot of vetting that goes into something before it makes air, especially if you're an investigative reporter. So that's always my advice. Make sure you cross your T's, dot your I's, at any level, even if you're doing general assignment reporting, even if it's an everyday turn. Don't assume anything. I was just talking to my alma mater, some college students, and they were young and getting into the business, but a lot of them were getting fired, sadly, because they were making those big mistakes. And I told them, if you have a question, if there's a gut feeling that something isn't right, ask somebody, because the last thing you want to do is have your gut feeling tell you, I don't know about this. And then you end up being, right in that sense. And then you get in trouble. So all that is important.
So and we have graduates on here, we have current students on here. So how do you define, or how do you distinguish in your research what is good content that helps build the story versus content that it's relevant, but this doesn't feel right, this doesn't look right? How do you know when I'm researching what's right, what's wrong, when everybody talks as if it's the truth?
Right. Well, you have to kind of look for the silver lining, but somebody always told me, if one side is telling you the sky is green and the other one's telling you the sky is purple, it's your job to look out the window and see what the sky actually looks like. So you have to you have to do your due diligence and lay all the cards on the table, figure out what's important, what isn't, and figuring out what's important, what isn't. It's, also about what's relevant to people. So for instance, in the story I want to do about, I'm doing a story about sextortion, and that's coming out on Juneteenth. And it's about, okay, what is sextortion? Some people don't really know what it is yet, which is basically sexual blackmail, of trying to get, and a lot of it's affecting our youth. Okay, wow, our youth are being impacted. How many of our youth? Let me go to the people who know. Let me go to the FBI. Let me go to Homeland Security. And that's how you're able to get it. Like, okay, I have a topic here. How is it relevant to people? Especially if it's impacting our youth, our elderly, or just a general population, then you know that you have a hook there. And that's usually how I figure out what's important. The fact that a lot of our young males are being impacted by sextortion. People think it's just females that are sometimes victimized by these types of crimes, these cyber crimes. It's not. Our men, our young men are being impacted. That's a hook that people probably don't know. So what's new? What's different? What's interesting? What can people learn from it? And there's a big thing now in journalism called solutions journalism. What are potential solutions? Who's doing something right that we can learn from? So just not only giving them the information, but also trying to give them education and solutions, like saying that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And even if it isn't, how can we get there? So there are so many factors that can make a story interesting, if you have all of it. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes you have so much data at your disposal, you're like, how do I keep my focus? But remember what's the focus of your story, right? If your story is to say, hey, I want to alert the public about sextortion, how it's impacting our youth. Keep that as your laser focus and make sure that all the information you're getting is centered on that focus. That's usually how I make sure that because sometimes you get a ton of information and you get overwhelmed, but just having that laser focus in your mind, that's the best way to keep track of what's your story's about and what's important.
Fantastic. So right now we are stepping into the top of the hour. Right now we have with us Caresse Jackman. I want to give you the nickname Michelle. We'll talk about that later.
Oh God, yes.
But and there's a story behind that we'll get into as we close out. But if you have any questions, what we're going to do before we go any further is let's open it up for questions. So there is this feature for everybody that's out there that's watching. If you have a question, go ahead and hit the hand up feature just like so, and you'll see hands pop up. So right now, what I want you to do is go ahead and hit your hands so that your hands can pop up again like so. And make sure you introduce yourself, think about your question, ask your question, and then give Caresse the chance to answer the question. With that being said, go ahead and hit your hands up, and we're going to unmute microphones. And David, you have the floor first. Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Phillip. I appreciate your time today. Thank you once again. Miss Jackman, you have a great energy. I love your energy. I mean, it's a blessing of God, your energy.
Thanks so much.
With that said, you're in DC. It's so funny. I'm from South Chicago. My good friend Jonathan Jackson just became U.S. Congressman. and he's in DC now. So I prayed with him. I performed with him actually at the Labor Day Union Parade. He was there, just didn't make an appearance, but I'm a rap artist. I went to Illinois Media School. I'm from South Chicago, down the street from Kanye West, and my name is the World Prophet. So with that said, they just the Times newspaper just covered a story with me because I did a song about hope. Right now, there's so much happening in this world and everyone needs hope. So I decided to reach out to Reverend Caresse Jackman, and he does my introduction for 45 seconds. And then I jump on a verse and my girl jumps on the chorus. So with that said, I want you to cover a story about me doing a song with Reverend Caresse Jackman, who ran for president of the United States.
Oh, wow. Oh, man. That's well, look, I mean, still pass along your contact information. I focus mainly on like consumer news, so that's going to be a little difficult for me to do, but I know what we have. We just started launching a brand called Investigate TV Plus, which is going to be like investigations plus features plus everything. So look, please, I mean, send me your information, send me your contact information. I can see what I can do. Always can't make any promises, but the fact that you were in the Times and everything, send all those links as well, because I can pass that along. Again, that would be considered in the features category. But I'm more than happy to like let my crew know and let my team know, because I think that's amazing. Because like you said, it's you know, you want to make sure you're giving positive things and positive images too. And I think that's amazing. So yeah, please, David, pass along your information, and I can definitely pass it along to some of my friends at Investigate TV Plus. We're two different branches, but it's still something that will air on all of our stations. So please pass along your information.
Yeah, one more thing. So before, how do I get a hold of your information? And second thing is really quick. My story is very positive. It's about helping the country, helping the cities, helping the world. So it is a positive story that's going to be able to reach out to our humanity and our society. And with that said, how do I get a hold of you?
Yeah, Phillip, could we pass along my contact information at the end?
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We'll put it at the end.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, David. God bless you too.
All right. So any other questions? Do we have any other questions? Pop the hand up so that we can see. Otherwise, I'm going to keep it moving in 3, 2, 1. All right. So I'm going to keep it moving then. So you talked about 2 types of stories that you do. You do short form and long form. So can you explain to everyone the differences between short form and long form?
Sure. So short form, it's about 1:30 to 2:30, 2 minutes 30 seconds, and those are stories that I do with my colleague Rachel DePompa, and they're called "Watching Your Wallets." So any kind of story that's dealing with how you can watch your wallet, whether it's budgeting, whether it's saving money on your credit cards, or for me, that's what my colleague Rachel does. I do more stories about, hey, be on your lookout for any types of recent scams, fraud, consumer awareness, education. What is the FTC working on? What is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau working on that you need to know about? So those stories don't necessarily take months to do. And so those are the stories that we distribute to our great TV stations every week. And then while I'm doing that, so that people can see what we're doing, see what we're working on, I'm still working on the big investigations, which are the long form stories. And those stories can go from 4 minutes to 8 minutes long. And those are the in-depth, deep dive investigations that I live for and that I love doing, because again, it's tedious. It takes sometimes months to do, but it's so rewarding once you do them because you're truly making a difference. And I like consumer investigations because it's not necessarily the kind of gotcha journalism, but it's like consumer investigations are kind of helpful investigations, exposing issues, not necessarily kind of going after a particular one person or 2 people, but it could be also going after, I don't know, my boss just worked on one about the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and basically how a lot of these recalled products are not even known to the public, and how some things stay on the market for long periods of time, even after they're recalled. So I worked on one snippet of that with my boss, but that's a really hard news consumer investigation that people need to know about. And so you work on those stories, and again, I work on the short form stories so that people know what we're doing, they know who we are, and because of that, you're able to sometimes get tips because people are seeing your face. Gone are the days where you're only working on things for months at a time you're not seeing, you know? So you have to give those short form stories out, get those short form stories out there so people can see what you're doing. And so I love both of them. I love the short because not everything needs to be a big deep dive. And I also love the deep dive investigation. So I'm really enjoying, I really like the role here I have at Great TV because I'm able to do both.
So let's talk about Great TV. How does Great TV support what you do, and how many stations are you sending your stories out to where eyes are seeing it all across?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm very blessed to be at Great TV because for so long I wanted that support system. Even when I pitched the story that I talked about in the last hour about the preservation of Black cemeteries and how a lot of them are not being preserved, I said it to my boss, and they're like, "Okay, well, what's the investigative hook here?" And I said, "Well, why don't we see how prevalent this is happening across the nation, at least east of the Mississippi?" And they were like, "I like it. Let's do it." Not all newsrooms can do that. Like, and not only, it's not that they are tone deaf about it and they don't think that's an issue, which some of them are, but a lot of them just don't have the resources and capabilities to do those stories. And so I'm very grateful that I'm in a place with Investigate TV and with Great Television to do that. And then we distribute it to our stations. So Great Television has about 113 television stations across the country, from Hawaii to Alaska to Atlanta to Nashville, and we distribute those stories to them. Sometimes we give them out in big chunks, like we give them our long form stories, and then we have condensed versions. And then we also have a TV show called Investigate TV that airs on our Great stations at different times throughout the weekend. So that gets over 1 million views. Our Great TV stations are like 34% of all US TV households, so it gives you a wide reach. And so it's big. And because of that, my stories have to be kind of broad, because we're reaching so many different people. So it's a cool job. And with that, and with all the TV stations, you have so many opportunities to get into the industry. We have entry-level markets, we have bigger markets, news markets, that is. So there's a lot of opportunity within Gray to grow and climb the ladder, which is what I did. I was in Nashville and there was an opening here for this position, and I was able to transfer and get promoted to this position. So you just never know. So it's a really great company, and it's a really great opportunity. And it's grown. When I was in Flint in 2014, I was with Gray, but it was much smaller. Then I left Gray, went to Tegna in New Orleans, and then I was with Meredith Corporation in Nashville, and then Gray bought Meredith. So I got reeled back into Gray. So you just never know where you're going to end up. And so Gray's a great a great company in my opinion, and they take care of their employees. They give you bonuses every year, so that's good.
Well, we like bonuses.
We like bonuses.
We like bonuses. So now when you talk about entry markets, because you talked about a couple of different markets, Ohio Media School prepares, is the premier school to prepare for entry-level media positions. So can you define for a lot of our graduates and students that are here, what does an entry-level market look like?
Entry-level market is basically what we call small markets, right? So it would be, and I'm sure a lot of you know this, but in the news industry, you have your number one market all the way down to market, I don't know, 230 or something, with New York being number one, followed by LA. I think Chicago's number 3, all the way down. And so I would say the last one is, I don't know, somewhere, I don't know, Alaska or somewhere, I don't know. But you have like a whole list of markets. And so when you're looking at an entry-level market, you're looking at somewhere that will let you come in right out of college or right out of your school, that will give you that chance to go there and grow. So I was saying in the last hour, my first market was Jackson, Mississippi. At that time, it was market number 90. I think it's gone down a little bit. It's all based on population and TV and the TV audience. So lots of times they're hiring like crazy in those small TV markets because they need people. They don't have a lot of resources oftentimes. So you really get to grit your teeth and learn and grow. And I always tell people, don't sleep on the small markets because you can make a lot of connections when you're reporting. a lot of your connections are sometimes sitting at City Hall or sitting in a city council meeting, and you're just kind of talking to the person next to you. And then you're like, oh, you know what? Here's my card. If you ever hear of anything happening in the community, just let me know. And you start to build that rapport with people and networking with people. And that really comes in handy. And I will never downplay a small market experience, because that is honestly where I grew as a reporter and as a journalist, being in those markets and connecting with people on that scale. So small markets to me are the best, because you really grow as a person living and working in those places.
And can you talk about the coaching once you enter into a small market? Because you mentioned your mentor. So can you talk about the significance of once you get your first media job in a small market, how important that coaching and mentorship is once you're in it?
Oh, it's so vital. And I always say the number one thing is not everybody is meant to be a mentor, you know? So if you got to kind of read their body language and see who's willing to guide you and connect with you. Not everybody's willing to do that. They're doing their business. They come to work and they go home, and that's okay. That's okay. But if you find somebody that you can connect with, that has been there, that's experienced, just start picking their brain a little bit. One of my mentors always taught me, when you get to a station, absorb, and then ask. And that's kind of how you have to go about your way. It's just observe what's going on, who might be a person that might help you, might guide you, observe it, and then just ask them questions. Just start to pick their brain and see if that's somebody that you can learn from and trust. And you don't have to necessarily tell them all your ambitions right away, but just see if they're willing to guide you down that path. And, every now and then just pick your brain. Hey, can you take a look at this story? Does this make sense, what I wrote? And just start kind of picking the brain and finding if there's somebody there that can actually help you along the way. And that's usually how I find my mentors. I kind of just feel people out when I first get to a place. I'm a little timid, just a little bit. No, I can't be too timid, because reporters, we can't be that way. But just a little timid in terms of trying to figure out who the playmakers are. One lady, her name is Karen Swinson. She is probably the best news writer. She retired recently at WWL's when I worked there in New Orleans. And I would just love to listen to the way she wrote stories. And I would tell her, I was like, Karen, look, I want to write like you when I grow up. She'd be like, oh, stop it, Caresse. But because of that, she realized, I saw her strength, and I wanted to kind of learn from that. And so anytime I wanted a package of a story to get approved, I'd sometimes just throw it her way. Or other people, this another guy named Tan Trung, he helped me teach me that when you're writing a story, especially even if you're in a local news market, look for the nugget that has national appeal. So if you're writing a story, I don't know, about crime that's happening in New Orleans, what do the national numbers look like? Throw that in your story. He taught me that. And that helped me along the way, now that I'm on a national outlet, to say, okay, this is why. You want to look at the grand scheme of things. So find people that you find that are strong at what you care about, strong with their skills, and kind of hone in on that. And don't be afraid to ask them, how did you learn that? How did you learn how to write like that? Tell me what you know. And I guarantee you they'll help you. Again, look for the people who are meant to be mentors, that are willing to help you. And that's pretty much my best advice.
Love it. So with that being said, and the conversation of mentorship and asking questions always comes with a caveat, a parallel, which is a lot of times the newer person is very, very ambitious and they want to grow, but then they look at the people that are there. And again, it's a smaller market and they have the ambition to be in a larger market. So they kind of can possibly get into the mindset of disqualifying the people that are in the smaller market because they're in the smaller market. How would you address the person who has those ambitions and kind of find themselves beginning to disqualify the mentorship and the advice from people in small markets because they're in a small market?
Don't do that, because let me tell you something about people in those cities. Sometimes I meet the best journalists in those small markets. They just chose to stay there because that's their hometown, or that's where their family is. They got married, they settled down. Not everyone has to climb the ladder and be Gayle King. You could be a Gayle King in your own in a small market, and so you don't have to necessarily make it to the top and climb all the way up to the top to be a respectable journalist. one of my best friends, and he just passed away in September, but he was a newscast director in Flint, Michigan. When I tell you that man grew up in Flint, knew every city, knew how to pronounce every word, knew how to pronounce every town. I would sometimes go to him before I went to some other people because I knew he knew the town unlike anybody else. And I would just be like, hey, Kent, come here. Am I saying this right? This township? And he'd be like, no, Caresse, it's pronounced this way, you know? So don't ever assume that because somebody is in a town that you want to eventually leave, or that they may not even be on air, that they don't know the city, you know, because oftentimes you're moving to a city you don't know anything about. New Orleans, half the time I couldn't pronounce some of the names of the cities because, you know, you have a lot of French and Spanish influence. And I'm like, wait, am I saying this right? And I'd ask a local friend, you know, a local colleague that was behind the scenes, because they oftentimes are locals, right? And I always say this, and my granny always said this. She said, even if you are a janitor, be the best janitor that you can be. And that's how I felt when I would go to these, to some of the markets. Did I have any intention on staying there? No, not necessarily. But I knew I was going to try to be the best reporter, get to know the community as much as I could, get involved in the community as much as I could. Because that's my town. At the end of the day, that's the city I'm living in for that period of time. So that is my city at that time. That's how you have to have, that's the mentality you have to have. I see so many reporters that come to a town, they're just like, oh, I'm leaving and I'm counting down, I'm doing all this and that. Don't have that mentality, because those people at home, that's their city that you're reporting about. So you have to have that mentality to say, this is my city too for the time being. Perfect example, I was working on before I left New Orleans, I was literally down to my last 4 months. And my boss came to me and said, Caresse, we want you to work on a story about why the East is so bad. So the neighborhood is called the New Orleans East neighborhood. And I remember thinking in my head, if you want me to do a story about why the East is bad, I need to talk about the story, but we got to peel the layer back, because there's a reason why the East is the way that it is. And if you've ever been to New Orleans East was the place to live back in the 70s and the 80s. Everybody wanted to move there. That was the place. But it slowly started to wither away. And then Katrina came and just hit the nail right on the coffin and never recovered. And so I said, if we're going to talk about why it's abandoned, why it's so bad, we've got to talk about the root of the issue. And so for about 4 months, I worked on a special. That was a 4-part series. And I want to say we released it about 3 weeks before I left. But I gave it all as if that was my first couple of months at that place. You know, you have to keep that hunger and that drive. And I remember the city, before I left, they were presenting, something in at a coffee shop in the East, and they gave me a plaque, a proclamation from the city of New Orleans, thanking us for doing that story that they wanted to see happen for so long. And I almost cried, because to me, that meant more to me than any Murrow, any Emmy, any other award, because it came from the people, right? So my biggest, advice is, don't just think that, okay, I'm in this town for just a season and I'm done. Sometimes just caring and just showing that you care about a city that you're working in speaks volumes. And that's how you have to be, honestly. So that's my advice for appreciating and respecting smaller markets, really.
Love it. So with that being said, it's 18 past the hour. If you have questions, make sure you get the hand up so that way we can see your hand. I'm going to throw this question out. We got David's hand. I'm going to give it to you and David. I'm going to finish this question first, which is, people believe that media has bias. Yeah. And you are a passionate person, and we all have our own biases.
Yeah.
So how do you check your own bias, especially about something you're passionate about, as you are researching and preparing the story?
You have to check yourself. You have to check yourself every step of the way. I'll give you one little perfect example. I was in New Orleans, and they said, hey, Caresse, we want you to do this story. And at the time, everybody know who David Duke is? David Duke? Yeah, so if you don't know David Duke, he was a former Grand Wizard to the Ku Klux Klan. And I remember he was running for Senate, and the Senate debate was going to be at Dillard University. If anybody knows anything about New Orleans and Dillard, that is an HBCU. So you've got this former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan going to Dillard to participate in the debate. Needless to say, the students were not having that. They were ticked off that they were going to have this former Klansman come to their school to be a part of it. Now, Dillard was like, look, we're not saying we like the guy. We really don't, but it's freedom of speech, right? So my station talked to the students the day before. And the next day, they were like, all right, Caresse, we talked to the students. We need you to actually talk to David Duke. They were like, here's his number. I said, all right. I said, oh, okay, this is an assignment. So anyway, I called him, and he answered the phone. And I don't know if you ever seen the movie Black Klansman, but I picked up the phone. And I said, hi, Mr. Duke, this is Caresse Jackman from Eyewitness News. And everybody in my newsroom turned around like, is she talking to David Duke? And he said, okay, yeah, I'll do the interview. And I said, okay. He's like, is it live? I said, no, it's not live. We're going to meet you wherever you are. So we ended up getting on. So he lived in Mandeville, which is about 45 minutes from the city. So it was me and it was my colleague, Vinny. And Vinny's also African-American. And Vinny got in the car. I said, Vinny, you're going to keep 9th Ward, New Orleans here. I'm going to keep Decatur, Georgia, South DeKalb, Caresse here. And we're going to get in this car. And we're going to go and do this interview. Because he got in the car. He's like, who are we interviewing? I said, David Duke. He's like, what? And I was like, no, let's stay on mentally on journalism. Like, let's go there and let's just do our job, right? Because I have my bias about him, but as a journalist, I've got to do what I got to do. So we got in the car, had 45 minutes to just prepare for what I might hear, study the facts, study information. And sure enough, during the interview, I let him say his piece. He talked about freedom of speech. I said, that's fair. But there were times where he said things that were inaccurate, right? And I had to challenge him. He told me at one point, I know you're not from Louisiana, but there was never a part of my group that ever harmed a Black person. And I just politely said, and what's the name of your group? And he started stumbling a little bit. He just said, well, I'm part of the Klan, but there's separate leaders. I said, but the documentation of the Klan's history is all throughout the history books, And so it's just kind of casually fact checking him. And so you have to know especially when you're going into an interview, how to fact check someone. Let them say their piece, but if they're saying something incorrect, you fact check them. You're being fair, but you got to fact check. And I remember by the end of the interview, I was like, oh my God. So I got back and my colleague who's Jewish was like, how on earth did you get through it? I said, I don't know. But it was just a matter of checking myself at the door or in the car for that matter. Just leaving my personal bias about this man. And I know he didn't like me. I could tell it from his face, but you don't let that stop you. You don't let that, that challenge affect you. You go in and you do your job. And so when people talk about biases and personal, we've all got them. You've all got them, but you've got to learn how to put your bias to the side, and it can be done. If there's anything that I learned from that interview is that I could put my bias to the side and get the job done. And I'll never forget that interview. That was probably, and if I could do that, I could do anything, I feel like, because that was eye-opening for me. So you just have to find a way to check your bias at the end of the day. Oh, can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I got you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm glad that we had that conversation. Let's go to Lorena. Lorena Wilson, you've got the floor. Introduce yourself and what's your question?
Hello, my name is Lorena. How you doing?
Good,
Excellent.
how you doing?
Yes. So I'm trying to figure out my niche is. Like, I don't know what I want to do. Investigating is like something I looking forward to. Cause I love like solving crimes and writing about them. So is any advice you could give me?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is get in the door, right? Get in the door, learn the ropes, learn, how to just put together a story. Because even investigations, it's taxing. It's it's stressful. So learn it, like once you get into the door, like, because are you trying to go into print, broadcast?
Probably like broadcast, but more independent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So one, look for opportunities that are out there, right? ProPublica is a great, in terms of print, ProPublica is great at investigative reporting or even doing general assignment and leading into investigations. So look for opportunities that are there that cater to what you want to do, passions that you have. And then you go from there. And again, little by little, show them, hey, I want to do this, something bigger. I want to do a deeper dive. So get in there, learn the ropes, and then start to slowly let them know where your passions lie. And if it's investigations, let them know that, show them your work, show them the work that you do, and then start to try to ask them to do more deeper dives, long form stuff. So that's my biggest advice. Anytime I would go somewhere, I do, the general assignment work, and then slowly let them know, hey, can I do a bigger project? Can I have a research day to do this? And slowly let them know that that's your passion.
Okay, thank you.
You're so welcome. Oh, you're muted, Phillip.
Okay, I think somebody's doing this to me. Thank you so much, Lorena. Evan, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate the time. I am a new graduate. I've actually been through this entire school curriculum before a long time ago. But I wanted to ask a very simple question here. You're talking about your main job as being a consumer reporter. Now, there are risks involved in being a reporter in general. Just talk in what terms. What kinds of precautions do you have to take in order to make sure that you are safe? Covering any of the stories that you're assigned. I mean, it could be a festival, or you've talked about some of the probably the more annoying things. But obviously, we've heard about consumer reporters that have had their problems. But I'd love to hear what you have to do personally just to protect yourself, and if there's like a corporate policy that Gray has that says, okay, you have to do these sorts of things.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I mean, that's a great question, because there's always precautions, and with the growing kind of hate for journalists and just truth seeking, it's tough. There was one time I was out on the scene, and it was for a feature story when I was in Nashville, and this guy came up and tried to attack me and my colleague. So it happens. I always say, just kind of use common sense, especially if you're out on the scene. Be aware of what's around you. That guy that tried to attack me and my photographer, I saw him on his porch kind of looking at me a little bit funny, looking at us while we were just getting some shots of a school. And it was like the most, it was a cute story about some old ladies knitting masks for kids, like during the pandemic. It was not even a hard hitting story. I was just filling in on a Sunday and it happened. So you have to be on your guard all the time, because you never know who's watching you. So you always have to have eyes and look out for each other, especially if you're like a reporter and photographer out on the scene. There have been several times where things have happened like that. I've known reporters who had guns drawn out on them. People have threatened them, slashed tires. So there are policies. I remember when that happened to me, we immediately told our station, and they actually put out a VO on the news saying, hey, this guy attacked our crew. If you know who he is, please call police, right? So they have protection in place, but sometimes your managers are not even there when things are happening. So you just have to be on the lookout. And after that, I started carrying some mace. So because you just have to be careful. But no, it happens, especially because our jobs are forever being challenged for what we do. You just kind of have to be on the safe side and look out for you, your teammate, your colleagues, everybody. So that's just my best advice. Just kind of be aware of what's around you. Another coworker of mine in DC, they were in the car getting ready to go out for a live shot. This girl just walked by and just smashed the camera on the ground, and they were like, what gives? We didn't do anything to you. They called police, so you just have to be aware and kind of about how the scene looks around you and be careful, because it is. And I'm glad you asked that question, because it happens more often than people think. It may not get out there, but it does.
Thank you so much, Evan. So, and I noticed, Caresse, you do a lot of evening reporting.
Yes.
So you do a lot of evening reporting. So that's a very, very good question. All right. Right now it's 2 minutes before 2 minutes before we wrap everything up. David, you've got the last question. We've got 30 seconds. So go ahead and ask it before we wrap up.
Hey, Ms. Jackman, it's so true what you say about the, the smaller markets. It's so true. Coming from a third largest market behind New York and LA, I got asked to perform in a small little town in Whiting, Indiana, to perform my music. And it's probably no more than 15, 20,000 people there. It's on the outskirts of Chicago on the south side. And I rocked the show and I gave it all. And I didn't say I didn't complain. Hey, I'm in a little town in Whiting. I rocked the show. I did my thing, and to this day, the mayor has given me recognition and the mayor continues to show me love.
That's what's up. I'm happy for you, David.
Yeah.
All right.